hello everyone. I'm just going to put my video on for a short moment. My bandwidth is not as strong so that you can at least see who you're talking to. Once again, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are connecting from. Welcome, and my name is Rumbi Elizabeth Shidori, and I'm the Regional Policy and Advocacy Coordinator for Sonke Gender Justice, based in the Johannesburg office in South Africa. And Sonke Gender Justice is the co-secretariat of the Men Engage Africa. Men Engage Africa is a network of over 24, we're now 24 African countries, which are also part of the Men Engage Alliance. So we're actually the largest regional grouping of the Men Engage Alliance, and we are in 24 African countries on the continent. So I'm just going to take you through quickly on 5 tips on getting to understand CSW, getting to know what is the Commission on the Status of Women and what's our role as Men Engage Alliance. Briefly, if we can go to the next slide. Thank you, Bianca. I'm just going to let you in on what the focus, what the priority and the review theme of next year's CSW68 is going to be. This is the priority theme: accelerating the achievement of gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls by addressing poverty and strengthening institutions and financing with a gender perspective. And these priority themes come from the 12 set priorities which are set in the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. So this is where the priority themes are drawn from. And then we do have the review theme, which is going to be focusing on social protection systems, access to public services, and sustainable infrastructure for gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. And this is based on the agreed conclusions of the 63rd session. The CSW in itself is a principal body, it's actually the intergovernmental principal body, which is exclusively dedicated to the promotion of gender equality and the empowerment of women. I think this is the only intergovernmental body which specifically looks at this. And it's also responsible for shaping the global standards on gender equality and the empowerment of women. If you will check in the chat section, I am also going to share, I've just shared with you some links to the session, the collective learning session that we actually did last year. You will find the video there, and I would encourage you to all go into that session. We really go into detail about, what CSW or CSW is and how you can do advocacy within CSW. So what happens at the CSW session is that there will be two convenings that are running co-current, which is the formal CSW, where you have the states, a member states meeting, and then parallel to that, you also have the NGO CSW forum. These are two separate processes, but there are parallel processes which will be happening at the same time. The forum runs parallel to the formal CSW, and it complements the formal process, which is led by the United Nations, whilst the NGO forum is led by CSOs, and it's specifically for CSOs, and it's also open to anyone. So if you want, as an organization, you want to do a parallel event or a side event along the margins of CSW, you would do it through the NGO CSW forum. Whereas opposed to the formal convening, where it will mostly be meetings with member states, and only organizations that have ECOSOC status will be able to do maybe oral statements or submit written statements to the sessions, which could be read in the sessions. If you're an organization that does not have CSW ECOSOC status, you can network or co-organize with an organization that does have ECOSOC status and be able to participate and be able to submit a statement or be able to submit an oral or a written statement. The NGO CSW Forum also prepares recommendations to be included in the outcome documents. And it also does have regional caucuses, which organizations can be able to participate in. So you do have your Africa Regional Forum caucuses, you do have your I think it's Europe and Asia as well. And again, this information is also available in the links that I've shared in the chat section. If we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you, Bianca. With regard to us and how we engage with CSW, and perhaps looking at what is the importance of engaging with CSW as the Men Engage Alliance, for us, it is very important to be able to challenge the discourses and practices that overly center a masculinities agenda, or that solely focus on men as champions and as victims of patriarchy. It's important for us to remain accountable to the feminist organizations and the women's rights organizations that we are building on the work that they have done in the past. So it's important that this is acknowledged and in the work that we do. It's also important that we seek to add value to the broader feminist agendas via the men and masculinities lens, because we know that when we're looking at issues of gender, it's not a women's or girls' issue only. It is an issue for all of us as society. And it's important that if we're going to be talking about how do we achieve gender equality, it's something that involves society as a whole. And it's important that we engage men and boys to be able to achieve gender equality. It's important that we work in alignment and amplify feminist, youth, and LGBTQI advocacy agendas, and especially the most challenging and political asks and demands. As Men Engage Alliance, it is very important for us to do that. We need women and young women's voices to be front and center, and we also need to be informed by feminist approaches and definitely in alignment with the feminist agenda. It's also important that we build partnerships with feminist women's rights organizations, SOGI, anti-racist, climate, youth, and social justice activists, because we do know that the issues that we deal with are intersectional, and it's important that we don't work in silos, but it's important that we harness our collective efforts so that we can be able to achieve gender equality within our lifetime. Earlier in the CSW that was held this year, the Secretary General did indicate that with the way that we're going and the manner that we're going, if we do not amplify the work that we do, if we do not have bold action in terms of achieving gender equality, it may be 300 years away. So I think that is really a clarion call for all of us to step up our efforts for all the work that we are doing. Within the chat section, I am also going to share some of the key dates for this CSW68 that is coming up. Please just check in the chat section as well. Just a moment, let me paste it there. Please let me know if you are also seeing this in the chat section, just to be sure. The CSW registration, 68 registration opened on the 6th of October, 2023, and will close on the 26th of January, 2024. So it's important that you are aware of these dates so that you can be able to register ahead of time. Registration for the parallel sessions or the side events at the NGO CSW forum is currently open, and that also closes on the 4th of December, 2023, on the link provided. So please do go ahead if you do have side events that you would like to host at the CSW forum, NGO CSW forum, please do make sure that you register for it. Registration for CSW is mandatory through an ECOSOC accredited organization on the Indico platform. So you go and register, and then you communicate with the organization that does have ECOSOC accreditation so that they can be able to approve your registration, and then you would be able to get the registration documents for you as you so that you can be in New York and attend the events. And then there is also an opportunity to participate in the Africa Disrupt CSW. This began, I think, in 2022. This was the first convening of the Africa Disrupt CSW, and this was really more of a drive for more meaningful regional participation for African women in all their diversities. We all know that sometimes it's always difficult for many of us from Africa, especially, to participate in the CSW in New York due to visas, the cost of visas, sometimes the high travel costs, travel and accommodation might not always be available for many of our organizations. So this is a forum where as Africans, we can participate in this Africa Disrupt forum. This is going to happen in February 2024. The venue and the dates will be communicated to you. Also part of the reason why this has been convened in Africa is that there's also been a shrinking space, particularly in New York, when we look at the organizations or the delegates that are allowed in terms of ECOSOC registered organizations, they can only accredit 20 participants. So there's already a limitation in terms of the numbers, in terms of the voices that will be there. And the Africa Disrupt is really aimed at centering the voices of African women and girls in all their diversities. If I can go to the, okay, thank you, Bianca, I see the next slide. Then just in terms of how we add value to gender justice movements through a men's and masculinities lens. For us, it's really important to work on transforming patriarchal, existing harmful patriarchal norms that are what we through many studies have actually revealed that these are at the root causes of the gender inequalities that we see in society. So it's important that we engage men and boys, and we work towards achieving women's rights and gender justice. It's important that our lens and our advocacy agendas are intersectional and are informed by feminist principles. It's important that we employ gender transformative approaches that really assist in giving an analysis, particularly of the power dynamics that exist in society and how we are able to counteract and mitigate some of these harmful dynamics and harmful norms and practices that exist in society that contribute towards gender inequality. It's important that our work is human rights based because the framework for human rights really provides the basis for gender equality. And it's important, again, as I mentioned earlier, that we are fully accountable to all feminist, LGBTQI, and other movements as well. It's important that also we have young people front and center, because as we know, If you look at Africa, for instance, I think we have the largest demographic of young people. So it's important that young people are informed. It's important that young people are engaged, because young people are the future and young people are the future leaders. So it's very, very important that young people are part and parcel and are engaged in these very key spaces, because these are issues that concern them as well. If we can go to the next slide as well. Also, another thing that is very key and that is important as you are attending CSW is very important to know is there is a growing opposition, particularly to anti-rights, and you will find that most opposition comes from religious entities. And we have seen the infiltration of religious entities in political spaces. We have seen them bringing significant financial backing to politicians, and their primary mission and objective has been to change beliefs and laws and traditional values, using tactics such as disinformation and misinformation, and usually around issues of access to safe abortions. We've seen that around LGBTQI issues. I mean, if you can see what is happening in Uganda, for instance, around issues of planning, family planning, around issues of SRHR and access to SRHR. So some of the organizations that we have seen that are actually, you will find them in some of these spaces, even in the CSW space. They're also there so that they can influence for their own and their particular agendas. So it's important that the pro-rights movements are in these spaces to counter some of these organizations. And you see some of them here, like the World Congress of Families, the Center for Family and Human Rights, the Russian Orthodox Church, the Vatican, Citizen Co, World Youth Alliance, Family Watch International. It's important that we are able to counter these opposition in such spaces, because when laws are done, it becomes very difficult to undo those laws. So it's also important that we are there to safeguard to safeguard the gains that we have made and the advances that we have made in terms of women's rights. I think I have mentioned pretty much in brief. I've tried to keep to the 10 minutes, I hope. But if you have any questions, please do share them in the chat section. I'm happy to answer them, and I'm happy to also get colleagues who are also in the room who have been at CSW, experienced CSW, to also share their experiences, share also some of the learnings that they have gotten by having experienced CSW. Thank you very much. I'm going to pass over to Bianca to take us through the membership, through the Mentimeter activity. Thank you very much.
We'd like to move on now to the next part of the session, which is the panel with the youth. And so I'm going to hand over to my colleagues, Precious and Nyasha, who will take us into that session. So thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you so much, Bianca. The challenges and the things we face when we work from home. So once again, thank you so much and welcome everybody to this wonderful pre-CSW session that we're having. And today I'm really super excited because when I shared with my team, like, hey, I think we should also be very intentional about having young people in the space, and let us see if we can convene a youth-led session. So I'm really excited because with me today, I'm going to have a very wonderful panel with young people that are very energetic, enthusiastic to share their ideas, experiences about engaging in CSW and what we can do as we prepare for CSW68. So I'm gonna have a co-moderator, that is Precious Nwayeze. I'm not sure if she has joined yet, but she might join very soon. Then we're also going to have Irene Ogeta, who is Program Officer, Young Women's Advocacy Membership and Development at Athena Network. We're going to have Tina Shongwe, who is also Executive Director for United Youth for Sustainable Globe Eswatini. Ranim Diab, who is the Policies and Public Affairs Coordinator from ABAD Resource Center for Gender Equality. Then Jimena Kale, Advocacy Coordinator, Choice for Youth and Sexuality. And then Mewish Kayan, who is the Program Manager, United Global Organization for Development. So we're going to have this conversation more of a panel, but also the colleagues here will be presenting some slides. So as I'm going to start, I'm actually going to be inviting Irene first and Tina. So Irene is going to be responding to the question, what are the main threads to explore within this year's priority theme, and how can we unpack these topics through an intersectional feminist lens? So let's hear from Irene first, and over to you, Irene, for your 5 to 7 minutes. Let us hear from you.
So thank you very much, Nyasha, for this space and for ensuring that young people are actually, also engaged in the space and contribute to the conversation. And I'm really grateful for men engaged, working so hard to create this space for us and ensuring that we also, our voice comes in handy and builds to the conversation. So maybe just to start with, could you confirm you can hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you very well, Irene.
All right. Thank you so much, Nyasha. So this year's CSW68 priority theme is actually accelerating the achievements of gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls. And I take this moment to forcefully include adolescent girls and young women. And it is indeed a quite comprehensive priority to unpack, but there are several main other themes that we could explore within this particular topic, including poverty, strengthening institutions, and financing with a gender perspective. So when it comes to poverty, it is very essential for us as leaders to examine the ways in which gender equality intersects with economic disparities. So basically, this involves understanding how poverty disproportionately affects women and girls, and how addressing poverty can actually be a crucial step towards achieving gender equality. So exploring this theme through an intersectional feminist lens means recognizing that women's experiences of poverty can actually vary based on factors such as race, ethnicity, disability, sexual orientation, and any other. And then when examining the intersection of gender inequality and economic disparities, it is also important for us to recognize that poverty disproportionately affects women and girls. So women often face unique challenges in accessing issues, things like education, employment, and economic opportunities, which can actually perpetuate a cycle of poverty. This can be due to various factors such as gender-based discrimination, limited access to resources and assets, and equal pay. In institutions, we see where men are actually working with women, but women will actually be paid way less, despite the fact that they have, equal or even higher qualifications in the same field, and also limited representation in decision-making positions. So when you look at this, they collectively contribute. However, it is critical for us to unpack this theme through an intersectional feminist lens, which actually takes into account the intersecting forms, of discrimination that women in all their diversity face. So women experiences of poverty can vary on factors, such as the ones I mentioned: race, ethnicity, disability, sexual orientation. For example, a woman of color may face additional barriers due to racial discrimination, right? while women with disability may actually face challenges in accessing suitable employment opportunities. So these are both women, but they're facing different kind of, challenges. By understanding these intersecting factors, we can actually develop more targeted, and inclusive strategies that will help us address poverty and promote gender equality. An intersectional feminist lens also helps us to recognize that women's experience of poverty are not homogeneous. So it acknowledges that different groups of women may actually face different challenges and require tailored intervention. For instance, policies aimed at poverty reduction should actually consider specific needs of marginalized groups, such as indigenous women, migrant women, or LGBTQ women, to ensure that they are actually included, to ensure inclusion and empowerment, to put it in a better way. So by addressing poverty as a crucial step towards achieving gender equality, we can actually work towards dismantling the systematic barriers that prevents women and girls from accessing economic opportunities and resources. And this involves implementing policies and programs that promote equal access to education, skill training, decent work, and financial services. It also means challenging gender norms and stereotypes that seem to be perpetuating inequalities in labor markets and society as a whole. So another point will be strengthening institution is another important aspect of this theme. And this involves around examining the laws, the policies, the social structures that shape gender dynamics and perpetuate inequalities. By actually unpacking this topic through an intersectional feminist lens, we can explore how different systems of power intersect with gender to create unique challenges for women and girls from diverse backgrounds. So this lens actually helps us who are actually in the movement and working towards gender equality and dismantling patriarchy to understand the ways in which institutional reforms can be more inclusive and address the specific needs of marginalized groups. So when we unpack this topic through an intersectional feminist lens, we recognize that different systems of power intersect with gender, creating unique challenges for women and girls from diverse backgrounds, right? So intersectionality basically helps us understand that gender inequality is not experienced in isolation, but intersects with other forms of discrimination, such as sex, race, ethnicity, class, disability, and any other. So for example, an intersectional feminist lens allows us to examine how institutional discrimination affects women differently, based on their intersecting identities. So women from marginalized racial and ethnic backgrounds may face additional barriers due to racial discrimination, while women from low-income backgrounds may encounter specific challenges related to economic inequalities. So by us having a deeper and more intense understanding about these intersecting dynamics, we can advocate for institutional reforms that are actually more inclusive and address these specific needs of marginalized groups. So this includes promoting diversity and representation in decision-making spaces, maybe challenging discriminatory laws and policies, and ensuring that institutions are accountable for actually addressing gender-based discrimination and violence. Furthermore, an intersecting feminist lens helps us, all of us, the ones convening here at this particular moment, and those of us who are actually out there still doing the same work. So this helps us to recognize the importance of addressing the underlying social structures, and norms that perpetuate gender inequality. It encourages us to challenge patriarchal systems and power imbalances that tend to limit women's agency and reinforce gender stereotypes. So this can involve promoting gender-responsive education, gender transformative education, foster cultural and social and engaging men and boys as allies in the pursuit of gender equality. So institutional reforms guided by an intersectional feminist lens aims to create more inclusive and equitable systems that empower women and girls from all backgrounds. So by dismantling discriminatory structures and promoting equal opportunities, we can work towards a society where gender equality is not just an aspiration, but a lived reality for all. So lastly, financing with a gender perspective is about ensuring that resources are actually located in a way that promotes gender equality, excuse me. So this means examining how financial systems, budgets, and even investments can be designed to address specific needs and priority of women and girls. An intersectional feminist lens at this point allows us to consider diverse experiences of women and girls and advocate for targeted financial mechanisms that I think will address the intersecting form of discrimination they face. So to just finish up, I think by exploring all the themes that's coming up within the priority theme through an intersectional feminist lens, we can actually gain a more comprehensive understanding of the challenges and opportunities in accelerating gender equality and also empowerment of all women and girls. Yeah, and this is going to help us recognize the unique experiences and the need of different groups and work towards a more inclusive and effective solution. Over to you, Nyasha. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Irene. There is no better person who could have done this presentation except the feminist that's in you. And thank you for really highlighting the importance of tackling the CSW theme from an intersectional perspective, because this is really important, because it also then gets to give us space to include all the marginalized groups, including young people and their diversity, key and vulnerable populations, especially in the CSW space, which sometimes gets to be very restricted for the engagement of such groups and populations. So I'll move on to Trina, and Trina has got some slides for us that she wants to present. So over to you, Trina.
Okay, Nyasha, I think I can just present since I just jotted down my slides. I can just present. You can go ahead with the question.
Okay, sure. So the same question, the question is still the same for you, Trina, to just hear from you, like, what are the main threads that we really need to explore when we look at this year's theme, and how can we really unpack these topics to ensure that there is really a collective understanding from an intersectional feminist lens?
Okay, thank you, Nyasha. And good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Like Anyasha has just introduced, I'm Tina Shongwe from Eswatini. So for me, while I was looking through the theme, accelerating the achievement of gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls by addressing poverty and strengthening institutions and financing with gender perspective, I just picked up four keywords from the theme. First, it is achievements, of which in every mission, there is an accomplishment or an achievement. In every run, there is a finish line. Therefore, in our quest for gender equality, during the CSW and beyond, I think we need to change the way we engage with men. I think we need to start engaging men as actors and pioneers of gender equality. We need to come up with something more like engaging for men as victims of patriarchy, not as perpetrators of violence. Start looking things in a lens like men are also pushed by their patriarchal role, which continuously put them as power holders. Also, I think we need to look in a lens of engaging youth, LGBTQI people, and the women in the rural areas, because we tend to forget that women are also in the diverse groups. So we need to also start looking in engaging women and girls in the rural areas, as they also feel left out in the discussion table. Also, in another, we need to also start like focusing on engaging faith and traditional leaders and government on their policies that they continuously pass, that continuously suppress, or that puts women in a corner. Then coming into empowerment, we need to change to start engaging and bringing men and boys for empowerment on GTA, giving men the space to interact on how they can transform from culture and religion whilst moving with time. still on empowerment also, because the team also outlined the issue of poverty. Poverty around women is caused by the issue of women not being in the economic space, women being not educated. So I think it is during the CSW, we need to be more like providing empowerment on women in all their diversities, on economic justice program to curb the ill of dependency, because dependency it is the main issue that that continuously perpetrate violence within families, because women will be pressured by their men at home. So we need to focus on providing programs that will empower women on economic justice and freedom. Then on strengthening, I think we need to focus on building capacities of women's rights, LGBTQI movement, and youth movement on feminist approaches to strengthen the advocacy movement, looking into the diversity of our communities. As my colleague has just said, we are from diverse groups. There are those women from the minority group, from the LGBTQI community. There are those women from rural areas. So we need to come up with programs that will target on building their capacities. Also, still on strengthening, I think we also need to focus on building partnerships with those movements in our local countries, those LGBTQI movements, those youth movements, to strengthen the network's ability to transform and to uproot the masculinities rooted under culture and tradition, whilst promoting advocacy for women's rights. Then lastly, on financing, the issue of resources in terms of us as youth organizations, because we are there, we are promoting gender equality, but without resources, our programs then become we work in our silos, because there is no way we can conduct outreaches without finances. So I think we need to start financing of LGBTQI movement, youth movement in an inclusive and a gender perspective, to accelerate in interventions that aims at advocating for women's rights. I think for me, Nyasha, it was just that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tina. I think this is really brilliant, and it's putting us into perspective on what we need to be looking out for as we try to unpack the CSW68 theme. And I loved how you touched on inclusion of everyone who is supposed to have a voice or who is supposed to benefit when we achieve gender equality. And I loved also the issue that you have just brought on financing. And I think the last segment of our conversation, we're going to have Zimena and Precious to talk about financing and what does that mean from a youth perspective and what we should be pushing for when we get into the CSW68 space. So at this point, I would like to invite my co-moderator, Precious Nwayeze from Nigeria, to take over the moderation. Over to you, Precious.
Thank you very much, Yasha. Thank you very much to the last two speakers. Really well made presentations. I really enjoyed that. So we'll be moving on to the next question, and we'll be having Mehesh. Hope I got the name correctly. Kiani, Programs Manager, United Global Organization of Development, and Raneem, Policy and Public Affairs Coordinator, Abed Resource Center for Gender Equality. And they will be speaking on the question, what are the links to transforming patriarchal masculinities and work with men and boys? So you both have the floor now. Remember, we have 7 minutes. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Precious and Nyasha, and everyone, who have put a lot of efforts to, organize this co-learning session and assisted the youth, forum and session over here as well. So yeah, as you have introduced me, I'm Avish, and I work with organization YouGood from Pakistan, and I'm also a youth reference group member and representing South Asia for Men Engage Alliance. Regarding the question is most probably that what are the links, how we can transform patriarchal masculinities and work with men and boys. And as the previous speakers have also shared, so I will I will not repeat those things, but I will just share a few situation analysis of my country, and it's almost the same for South Asia as well. So you will have an idea that what is the situation, and then obviously we will be pitching in how it will contribute to those questions and our statement and CSW68 priority theme as well. So the prevailing challenge of gender disparity in Pakistan encompass various aspects of societal norms and policy deficiencies, economic imbalances, and in the country, which is the largest population, I guess fifth or sixth largest population, but in economy we are ranked at 149th, and the lack of we do have a lack of high professional opportunities for women, and this is a very pressing concern as well, because we do not have that much women representation over here as well, which is just like 33% or something in very high professional jobs and political party seats as well, and which needs to be by 50% or more than that, so we can eradicate these gender disparities, and obviously the poverty linked with that as well. And so tragically, the prevailing message is for many girls and females often revolves around marriage as their primary goal, and which is with limited emphasis on pursuing to their career. And in rural setting, where females informally contribute significantly to the economy, their often their efforts go very unrecognized, and they face unequal pay compared to their male counterparts. And and conversely, in urban areas, women do not have permission to work, and even if they do have permission to work for employment, they have very restricted options, limited options for employment, like they have specific fields like teaching, which is just a part-time opportunity for them. So this make a very limited distribution of economy role and opportunities, and perpetuates to gender discrimination, and comprises of a crucial aspects of life, and it also have impact on their health and education, as most of the speakers are talking about already as well. And the Pakistan current scenario reveals a substantial economic burden as well, because we have a household of like 8 people and only one man is earning, and the whole family is dependent on the earning of that male part of the society, and that's why they are contributing to they are contributing very less, and due to the economical conditions as well, they are facing discrimination and negative impacts on overall prosperity index or and per capita of income as well. So a more equitable distribution of this burden shared by both genders has the potential of greater higher income, and this will reduce poverty and leading to improved living standards as well. So the in practice of young boys, yeah, most of the time we have seen the young boys are chaperoning their female family members for sake of their safety, and maybe playing role as a driver for picking and dropping off to schools and different places where they want to go. And this by this thing they just waste most of their productive time by just chaperoning and doing such things. So this is very much necessary, so we should instill such things and transform gender masculinities, and we should make females independent for so they can go to different places, and they have a very good commute as well, so they have no dependency on male counterparts. And additionally, in in rural settings, females dedicate almost 72% of their time in productive work, while male produce just have 63% of their time in leisure activities like chit chatting and having tea time and socializing with other people. So these things contributes a lot, and for these things, because if we want to bring the gender equality, and as per the priority theme of the CSW68, so what we are doing is and what we are proposing is we have to work with men and boys on very earlier level, and we need to bring the behavior change in them, and this is how they gonna respond to that as well. They will learn, and they will bring those changes in day-to-day life, and bring very small changes that it will contribute a lot to overall gender dismantling the gender discrimination about females and gender as well. And along with that, we need to do positive parenting, because while we have to work with with gender transformation, we do not have to just only work with men and boys, but obviously with females as well, because they have learned these things, and these things are instilled in those women as well from the time of their grandmothers and grandmothers as well. So they are doing it and replicating it over the time period as well. So that's why we need positive parenting as well. We should teach them that how you should upbring your boy or girl in a way that they should be on the same level. You have they be having education in the same school, not because most of the time we see that the girls are studying in a very low profile school, but in a very elite type of school only boy child is going for education. So a lot of differences you can see on a very earlier level as well. So that's why what I propose is we need to work and we are working on behavior change strategies. We need to work on early childhood development, because the cognitive skills develop at a very initial time. And when the boys are not being put into this situation of doing helping in household chores, and do not telling them that these are the life skills, not just a paid thing just for male or maybe for the girl. So this will make a lot of difference, I guess. And yeah, as I have shared earlier, that we need to do accountability as well, because we do have a lot of funding, and we want a lot of fundings as well. But as I told you that when we see that we have funding for women-led organization, or maybe where a lot of women are working. So most of the time what we do a tokenism. We just hire them on a very low a pay scale from the male counterparts, and there is no accountability as well. So I guess these all contributes to these things, and we must work for these challenges as well. So thank you so much. I think my time is over. Thank you, Naisha, and over to you, Ranim.
Hello everyone, thank you Niesha for everything you shared, and specifically I think the importance of collab is here, where we share from our own geographic region, our own expertise through this platform. What have we experienced, what are the obstacles, challenges, and what kind of solutions have worked for us, and what kind of perspectives we have on the same matter. So thank you so much for everything you shared. From your experience, we learn. Now, when we speak about links to transforming patriarchal masculinities and work with men and boys, so in most parts of the world, men dominate positions of political, economic, and social power, and no country does genuine gender equality exist. So, of course, this does not mean that all men and women are or feel powerful. However, many, perhaps most men often feel relatively powerless in terms of their political influence, wealth, or social status. Now, men differ greatly in their access to and control over economic, political, and social power. So the roles, behaviors, and attributes that are associated with maleness and considered masculine usually bring greater social status, economic reward, and political power than those associated with the feminine. So putting this as a base for the discussion, and saying that even though more and more women are taking on leadership roles in many walks of life, from government to private companies, the norm remains that leadership is seen as masculine and done by men. Now you will know why I'm focusing on leadership. So authority still has a male face. I really want to stress on this idea. Women who go into politics, for example, or who seek senior positions in businesses are often stigmatized for not acting like proper women or being too manly, because women in these roles might be seen as challenging men or taking space away from men. And they often face harassment and abuse from men who are attempting to reinforce their own power and control. Well, that said, scaling the leadership, the power dynamic into private life. The unequal power dynamics between men and women in intimate relationships specifically can have serious repercussions for the risks and exposure to violence and the overall well-being of the family. And here I would like to state that violence is about power over. So how does all that link to the question, what are the links to transforming patriarchal masculinities and work with men and boys? Speaking from the experience of Abad, which is the organization that I work with, I relied on my colleague's introduction, but I let go of reintroducing myself. Everyone, I'm Raneem Diab, Policies and External Relations Coordinator at Abad Research Center for Gender Equality that works on EMENA level, so the Middle East and Northern Africa level. And we have conducted under the question of tackling patriarchal masculinities under the title of gender equality. We have initiated back in 2018 the program called AB. Ab in Arabic means father. So how would I relate fatherhood, or the question is why fatherhood as a link to transforming patriarchal masculinities and an angle to work with men and boys. To take you through the journey very quickly, Abad internally, since the inception of their masculinities program, is referred to as the gender without the G word approach. And this is absolutely vital this approach is absolutely vital in times where NGOs, specifically feminist NGOs, are facing a lot of backlash. So while working with masculinities programs, it has been quite successful in the approach of engaging men thus far. Fatherhood programs we believe that it really allowed the perfect opportunity to utilize the strategy of gender without the G word perfectly fine, resistant, or apathetic, specifically with difficult, resistant, or apathetic population. The strategy of engaging men for gender equality, going back to the question, through their identities as fathers is culturally very relevant and congruent with important national narratives. Now, to bring back the scope to the not personal, but the experience, the very local experience. So we want to speak about the narratives in Lebanon and many other cultures in the Middle East and North Africa region. The identity of father and the importance of roles that the father fulfills within the family are held in very high regard in Middle Eastern cultures such as Lebanon. That's why I started speaking about leadership roles. As such, engaging men through their identities and roles as fathers becomes strategically advantageous, as many men from the general population are interested in how they can understand and fulfill their roles as fathers to the greatest degree. To speed the explanation, we have seen and monitored and observed that overly open discussions of gender, sexuality, and equality are often met with apathy and resistance in the Middle East, often manifesting itself through violence. The utilization of the identity of fatherhood as a topic of conversation can greatly increase the number of men and women who would be interested in participating in group community discussions or workshops. So this is another angle of targeting violence against women and patriarchal masculinities. Using fatherhood programs to begin these discussions and steadily build rapport with the communities in which these fatherhood programs are conducted, also importantly allow the opportunity to build with larger community such progress. Lastly, to say that I want to give an example of a beneficiary and participant in the AB program feedback. It really touched my heart, and I really wanna showcase the example of why fatherhood, when we're speaking about transforming patriarchal masculinities. A 31-year-old displaced Syrian woman who was participant in the AB programs. Her husband was participant actually. She said, "My husband is now capable of apologizing to me without fear that this threatens his masculinity. He takes my opinion into consideration in all things, and he shares household chores with me. He used to think that violence against me could be justified whenever I was not performing my duties properly. But this has changed since he took part in the program AB." So to end it on this note, it is the responsibility of all individuals
women and men, to strive to raise boys and men as well as girls and women, to understand how violence prevents individuals from building positive and loving relationships. It's commonly assumed that perpetrating violence is a natural or normal part of being a man. Just as violence is learned, it can be unlearned and prevented, especially from the protection of women's and children's rights. We expect mothers to be the primary caregivers and sources of affection. It's important to critically examine these assumed roles and decide for ourselves the type of fathers we want in society. Thank you so much. And I really hope that Abad's experience in working with patriarchal masculinities through the program gave you some insight on the work in the region. And if you have any follow-up questions, please reach out to me. I will put my email in the link. And I will actually add a pamphlet about AB program for whoever is interested to know more about it. I put it in the chat box. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Raneem. Thank you, Herwish. I really like what you said about empowerment of women to reduce dependency on the male counterparts and how it goes to produce or result to a more balanced and stable society. And also great work that you are doing in Lebanon, Raneem. I'm glad you could share some of the feedbacks. So now I would have to call on Yasha to introduce the next two speakers. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Precious, for moderating this section. So we're going to move on very quickly, and I'll ask these two speakers because I know they can. That is Precious and also Jimena from Choice for Youth and Sexuality to take over the space. And they're going to also just unpack, especially the part of the CSW theme, which is looking at issues around financing and poverty, youth engagement, etc. So over to you, Jimena and Precious, and you've got 10 minutes to do this, and I'll be going off mute to remind you if you go over the 10 minutes.
Thank you so much. Maybe I can start. My name is Jimena. Thank you so much for the introduction. I am an advocacy coordinator. I work for Choice for Youth and Sexuality. It's a youth-led organization. So now you will understand better why we are presenting youth-friendly funding. So we see indeed that this topic will open opportunities for us to advocate for this. But before going into the topic, I want also to give the floor to Precious to introduce herself because we're going to be doing this together.
Thank you, Jimena. Hello, everyone. I'm Precious again. I work with Mercy and Peace Creation in Nigeria. Time won't permit me to say all that we do, but let's just leave it at that. Thank you.
So I'm gonna try to go very quickly through the next slide, because I think first of all, we actually see that the priority topic of this year, it's going to be financing, it's going to be poverty, and there's so many links. It serves actually as an umbrella also to ensure that funding can arrive to young people. So youth-led organizations, youth-led grassroots, youth-led communities, youth-led movements. And throughout the time, this is actually not happening as we would like to see it. But the relevance of that to happen, specifically with the priority theme, is that only when young people are equipped with the resources and the skills and funding, they can actually work for their own needs. Unfortunately, many times we see youth-friendly funding being advertised by different organizations, and is not really involving young people at the end. It's maybe made for young people, but at the end not with young people, and that really changes the results, because at the end we have either a lack of funding or not addressing the needs that are the real needs, or tokenistic approaches that I think we many times see. And I'm sure that in the call a lot of people will feel that this resonates with them. Unfortunately, as you can see, currently is very limited. Only in 2020, the 5.56% of the official development assistance, so this is like the 10 main donors, that work with gender equality targeted young people between 10 and 24. So we're talking 5%, which is really nothing. And finally, we see this then as a transformative potential, but especially when we are able to target marginalized communities, because many times we also need to ask ourselves the question, which young people are involved? Yeah, so can we go to the next slide? Thank you. So I'm going to very quickly take you through the first barriers, and then I'm going to hand over to Precious to continue with the barriers that are faced by young people when accessing funding. I'm going to go very quickly through it because we don't have much time and because I think recommendations are the most important. So the first one is economic and social hardships. So indeed, education, health, and how much access people have to this actually also hinder the opportunity of young people to advocate for their own rights. Because when actually these are not met, just advocating or advocacy becomes a privilege because you have to have a work in the side or study in the side. So then advocating for your rights becomes just a privilege. The second one is the lack of access to education and literacy, literacy including writing, reading, but also digital literacy. In the third place is stereotypes and biases, because we often think that young people are unable to take responsibilities or are unable to make decisions or inform decisions. And I think this is actually not true, but is hindering the opportunities of young people to participate in decision-making spaces, especially when funding is decided. The digital divide that I think is very clear, so I'm not going to explain it. And as fifth, and I think this one is very important, is the requirements for legal registrations, because often grants or donors require organizations to be officially registered. And youth-led organizations, but also organizations like LGBTQI organizations, are not able to do it, which means that you cannot access funding. And if you do, then maybe your government will target you because your activities might not be supported by the government, so you're scrutinized. I'm gonna hand over to Precious to conclude the barriers and to also go to the next slides.
Okay, thank you. Her name, Jimena, sorry. I'll be going quickly through the rest of the barriers, and the next on the list is complex application processes. Now, this particular one can be really frustrating, and I'm sure that most of us here, most youths have actually experienced how complex some of these application processes can be. Language barriers, especially English-centered communication, excludes many young people from learning about funding opportunities, let alone applying for these opportunities. The next is divergent priorities, then project-specific funding, causing youth organizations to be burdened with core costs such as staff salaries and other operational costs. Then lastly, lack of access to networks, contacts, adequate knowledge of funding cycles or donors' agenda. So quickly through the recommendations. The first is ensure preconditions for meaningful youth participation, which should include access to inclusive and quality education for young people in all our diversities, committing to challenge and dismantle stereotypes and biases that cause young people to not be taken seriously in decision-making spaces, removing age restrictions and other hurdles that may limit young people's participation in policy making. The next is ensure funding is youth-friendly. Now, youth-friendly fundings are fundings that are accessible, that are flexible. The next is support and strengthen the capacity of youth organizations by promoting trainings and sharing necessary tools with organizations to ensure that young people hold equal power in decision-making processes, establish platforms to facilitate networking between young people, potential donors, and mentors. Also creating youth-led accountability frameworks, that makes organizations as answerable and accountable to young people. So the next is prioritize inclusivity by offering opportunities in multiple languages, promoting targeted support for marginalized groups, like my other colleagues have also mentioned. They mentioned a list of some marginalized groups. Also ensuring that young people are at the center of the design implementation, and decision-making around funding opportunities, which would truly reflect the young people's agenda and their priorities. The next is propelling intergenerational and cross-sectional solidarity, calling for collaborations between the government, civil society organizations, and the private sectors to create funding for youth-led initiatives. And lastly, bridging the digital gap by ensuring digital literacy, access to technology, digital skills that enable participation in online advocacy, promoting funds that leverage technology to create sustainable, innovative solutions for youth-related challenges. I would like to call on Jimena to put in a few words and then conclude this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Precious. Yeah, just to finish, so all these barriers and the recommendations were actually gathered to get put together for a CSW written statement. So you can still go check, because all the recommendations that Precious just presented are written down and ready to be pushed in advocacy. So they are nicely written down and accessible to delegates in the language of CSW. I'm going to paste after speaking, I think, on the chat, so you can access the statement and sign on. And just to conclude, being a young person or being a youth advocate in CSW could be very intimidating. So here are very few advices maybe for you to follow in case you want to engage next year. We would say first, read resources about the space, get familiar with it. We have a fact sheet that has been already shared in the chat. Also make a list of your own priorities as a youth advocate. What is it important for you? And then based on those priorities, get in touch with more youth advocates. You can contact in your programs to attend more meetings like this one, where you can find people who think alike, who are also attending. And also get in touch with the Young Feminist Caucus. This is a feminist youth-led movement in CSW, very active. Choice is a member of the Young Feminist Caucus. So if you would like to get in touch with them, I'm gonna also put my email. We're very happy to connect you with them. And I think that's it. So thank you so much. And I hope this was helpful.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jimena and Precious. You are rightful on time. You just took 10 minutes to re-unpack for us the issues around financing for young people, and also rounding it off with some key priority points that as young people or as anyone who's going to engage at CSW can actually focus on. So at this point, I would like to invite Sean Cartwright from UN Women, and Sean is going to share with us how can we engage in CSW and the processes leading to CSW. Just a background of what we can do is we mobilize each other towards CSW. Sean, are you here? And over to you for your, we're running a bit out of time, so we're gonna do this maybe for 10 minutes.
Thank you so much to my Men Engaged colleagues and to all the amazing feminists in the room who have laid out such important points. I'm in solidarity with all of you, and it's truly inspiring to see so much mobilization already around the forthcoming session of the CSW. Excuse my nasal voice. I'm recovering from the flu, and excuse the fact that I might be sniffling and coughing throughout my intervention, but I'll try to keep it as clear and consistent as possible. To begin, I just want to introduce myself. I'm Sean Cartwright from the Civil Society Division at UN Women. I am based in New York City. And I've been involved in CSW preparations, operations, and advocacy since 2019. And to start off, I would like to go into perhaps a little bit of a deeper dive of the CSW68 priority theme, and kind of add to what a lot of my fellow feminists have so eloquently laid out in their interventions. As many of you know, each CSW session is essentially started out by an expert group meeting. So this is a collection of mostly civil society experts, as well as academics, government representatives, UN representatives, who come together to formulate a set of recommendations for the Commission in a report around the priority theme of the year. And I wanted to share the expert group meeting report, as well as the related report of our Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, are not out yet. We expect them to be out in the coming weeks. They usually come out towards the end of the year prior to the session in March. But I wanted to lay out some of what we expect to see in terms of the key kind of critical issues the expert group meeting report and the report of the Secretary General will speak to. So you're getting a bit of an insider scoop ahead of the actual publishing. And please let me know, of course, if you have any questions. So one of the issues we anticipate will be a key focal point is, of course, women's and/or gendered poverty, which is, as delineated in some of the interventions previously, a process of deprivation and depletion that limits women's and gender diverse people's access to decent standard of living, food security, healthcare, education, and quality work. The disproportionate burden of care and domestic work further exacerbates their economic vulnerability. Discriminatory laws, lack of economic opportunities, and biased social norms contribute to this unequal access to resources and assets. Another key element will be intersectionality, as discussed previously. Women and girls facing multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination, including race, ethnicity, disability, location, marital status, sexual orientation, and gender identity, among other factors, experience deeper poverty and more significant limitations on opportunities and resources. And violence against women or gender-based violence is also a significant factor contributing to this poverty and inequality. Another key element will be focusing on labor market inequality. Women and gender diverse people face gender inequalities in the labor market with lower participation rates and lower earnings for work of equal value. Many women also work in the informal economy, which is characterized often by job insecurity. And the COVID-19 pandemic, as we know, has further impacted women's employment. Another aspect will be climate change and poverty. Environmental factors, including climate change, disproportionately affect women and gender diverse people living in poverty. They may have to travel further to access basic resources, worsening their time poverty and limiting their ability to engage in paid work. Gender responsive policies for a just transition to a low carbon economy are essential in this vein. Another aspect is a multidimensional analysis. Traditional poverty statistics based on household surveys do not account for the uneven distribution of resources within households, where women often have less power and control over income and assets. A more comprehensive analysis, hence this multidimensional framing, is needed to understand the impact of inter-household dynamics on women's poverty. Another aspect is economic and social policy. Neoliberal economic policies and limited fiscal space have failed to improve well-being. Gender-responsive fiscal and monetary policies are necessary to create more inclusive and equitable growth. These policies should be reinforced with effective social protection, skills development, and labor market actions. Another point is financing for eradicating women's poverty. Many countries face fiscal consolidation pressures, leading to reduced social spending and impacting women, especially those in informal work. Domestic public resources are essential for addressing gender inequality, and progressive taxation and gender-responsive budgeting can support this goal. However, mobilizing large-scale private finance for gender equality remains a challenge. Another point is governance and institutions. The current global economic governance system has limitations in addressing poverty and gender inequalities. Debt distress and global tax regimes contribute to a limited fiscal space for low and middle income countries, as we know very well. Public institutions, including gender equality mechanisms and transparent governance, play a crucial role in addressing these challenges. And the final point that I believe we'll see in these reports is a call for a new economic framework. Advocates for gender equality and feminists are calling for a more humane and caring economic system based on human rights, equitable care responsibilities, and decent work. This framework would prioritize the well-being of people and the planet over financial gains, promoting equitable rights and a redistribution of care responsibilities. And so on top of this, and as we know, CSW68 will also table the agreed conclusions of CSW63 as its review theme, which is something that happens every year at the Commission on the Status of Women. So the review theme will be social protection systems, access to public services, and sustainable infrastructure for gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. As in all sessions of the CSW, the Commission will monitor the implementation of these agreed conclusions and review progress on this theme. Member states are expected to provide updates on their efforts to advance gender equality and address the specific challenges outlined in the conclusions. And from a men and boys and masculinity perspective, in the CSW63 agreed conclusions, the Commission explicitly recognized the importance of the full engagement of men and boys as agents and beneficiaries of change, and as strategic partners and allies in the promotion of women's and girls' access to social protection systems, public services, and sustainable infrastructure, and in the achievement of gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls. The Commission also urged states to take all appropriate measures to recognize, reduce, and redistribute women's and girls' disproportionate share of unpaid care and domestic work by promoting the reconciliation of work and family life, the equal sharing of responsibilities between women and men's equitable sharing of responsibilities with respect to care and household work, including as fathers and caregivers, through flexibility in working arrangements, without reductions in labor and social protections, and support for provisional measures of infrastructure, technological and public services, such as water and sanitation, renewable energy, transport, and information and communications technology, and the implementation and promotion of legislation and policies such as maternity, paternity, parental, and other leave schemes. And now, if we would like to continue applying a masculinities lens to this, to these two themes, as many of my fellow feminists have done so eloquently in their interventions, I would personally apply a two-pronged lens to this year's priority theme and review theme. One would be a focus on the concrete steps that men, especially men in positions of power, can take to address gendered poverty and promote equitable access to social protection systems. And another would be a focus on transforming patriarchal understandings of the economy and government structures. So this first kind of lens of concrete steps that men can take, I would first highlight sharing unpaid care work. I mean, this is very basic, but and something that feminists have been saying for years, but something that we just have not really moved the needle on anywhere. Across the world, the bulk of care and support work is still left to women, including girls, young women, gender diverse people, older women, and women with disabilities, without recognition or adequate pay, hindering their equal participation in society. Men should actively participate in unpaid care work, such as caregiving, housework, and child rearing. Sharing these responsibilities more equitably allows women to have more time for paid work and education, and reducing their risk of poverty. Men should also actively participate in parenting, and caregiving responsibilities. This not only benefits women, but also strengthens their relationships with their children. So as we know, legislation does not always lead to action. According to Equimundo's State of the World's Fathers Report 2023, in many countries where gender-neutral parental leave versus maternal leave has been recognized by law, which is a progressive step that ought to be adopted by all states, many fathers are simply not taking the time off. So we need more fathers to take up parenting responsibilities to help reduce women's risk of poverty. And another lens to this kind of these concrete steps would be advocacy, allyship, and challenging harmful social norms and stereotypes. Men can play a role in challenging traditional gender norms and stereotypes that contribute to women's poverty. Men can serve as positive role models for boys and young men, teaching them about the importance of gender equality and respect for women and girls, and gender diverse people. This includes redefining notions of masculinity that perpetuate gender inequalities and limit women's opportunities. Men can also support efforts to achieve equal pay for work of equal value. Advocating for pay transparency and supporting women's rights to a fair wage is crucial in addressing economic disparities. Men can educate themselves and others about the challenges women face, including the intersectionality of gender with other factors, by raising awareness about these issues. Men, especially male political leaders, can advocate for policies that promote gender equality, such as paid parental leave, affordable childcare, and anti-discrimination measures in the workplace. And lastly, another concrete step would be taking steps towards ending gender-based violence. None of the actions to end women's poverty and promote equitable access to social protection systems, public services, and sustainable infrastructure will be complete without putting an end to gender-based violence, including sexual violence. And men, as we know, play a crucial role in this. Men should model and promote healthy, nonviolent relationships in their own lives. This includes treating their partners and loved ones with respect, communication, and equality. Men can participate in and support programs and initiatives that aim to prevent GBV. These programs often involve education, awareness raising, and community engagement. Men can educate themselves and others about the prevalence and impact of GBV. They can also raise awareness about the importance of consent, respect, and healthy relationships. Men should encourage accountability for those who commit acts of violence. This includes not condoning or excusing such behavior. Men in leadership positions particularly should advocate for policy and laws that address GBV, including stronger legal protection for victims and consequences for perpetrators. And so the other focus of this kind of two-pronged approach that I would apply is this notion of transforming patriarchal understandings of the economy and governance structures. As we know, a patriarchal neoliberal economic model is a system of economic organization and governance that combines patriarchal or gender-based and neoliberal or market-oriented principles, resulting in gender inequalities and social disparities. In a patriarchal economic model, traditional gender roles are reinforced, with men typically occupying positions of power and control, while women and gender diverse people are relegated to subordinate roles. Women face unequal pay for work of equal value, limited access to economic opportunities, and a disproportionate burden of unpaid care work. Economic policies and practices may not take into account the specific needs and contributions of women and gender diverse people, leading to gender-based disparities in income, employment, and wealth. And in a similar vein, in a neoliberal economic model, the market is considered the most efficient allocator of resources, and government intervention is minimized. Economic policies prioritize the reduction of barriers to private enterprise, which leads to the concentration of wealth and power among a few individuals or corporations. Social safety nets and public services may be reduced or privatized, which can negatively impact vulnerable and marginalized communities. In the same vein, this model is inherently extractive, unsustainable, and self-destructive. As we watch, for example, a handful of predominantly male billionaires, mostly in the global north, slowly turn our planet into an unimaginable, uninhabitable wasteland. To embellish this point, I recently saw a tweet by a doctor who said that the neoliberal economic model is based on the notion that you can enjoy limitless growth in a closed, finite system, where in biology, such behavior is called cancer. And now when we combine these two economic models into what I'm framing as a patriarchal neoliberal economic model, this results in a system where traditional gender norms and inequalities intersect with market-driven economic policies. And some of the outcomes and characteristics of this model include women often earning less than men for similar work, contributing to this income inequality, women facing challenges accessing credit, funding, and economic resources needed for entrepreneurship and economic mobility, women just being disproportionately responsible for unpaid care work, as we've discussed, limiting their participation in the formal labor market and their education attainment, and policies that lead to the reduction or privatization of public services such as healthcare, education, or social welfare, which can disproportionately affect women and gender diverse people who rely on these services, as well as policies that contribute to wealth concentration, where a small population amasses significant wealth and others struggle to meet basic needs. Hence, transforming patriarchal understandings of the economy and governance structure is a complex and long-term process that requires a multifaceted, multi-stakeholder approach. And here I'm going to list some high-level strategies and actions that we can potentially use to achieve this, and something that we might want to consider in our advocacy around the forthcoming sessions of the CSW. A fundamental step is just basic advocacy for gender equality, as we're all already doing in all aspects of life, including in the economy and governance structures. This includes equal representation in positions of power, rights, and opportunities for people of all genders. It includes actively supporting and encouraging women's leadership and participation in economic and political leadership roles. This includes policies and initiatives that promote women's representation in decision-making positions. We ought to push for policy changes that promote gender equality and challenge patriarchal structures. This may involve advocating for gender-responsive budgeting, anti-discrimination laws, and policies that support work-life balance. We also need better data. We need to gather data that is disaggregated by gender to understand how these patriarchal norms impact economic and governance outcomes. We need to use this data to inform policy and decision-making. We need to challenge and change harmful gender stereotypes and social norms that reinforce patriarchal beliefs and systems. We need to implement programs and initiatives that support women's economic empowerment, such as access to credit, education, and training. And we know that empowered women can challenge patriarchal economic structures. And as we know from this very enlightening call, women's and feminist movements have been at the forefront of challenging patriarchal systems. Support for these movements through resources, advocacy, and solidarity is needed. We need to examine and reform laws and regulations that perpetuate gender-based discrimination in the economy and governance. We need to ensure that they are in line with principles of gender equality and human rights. We need to ensure that budgets and economic policies consider and address gender disparities. This can help identify and rectify gender inequalities in resource allocation. We need to ensure that women and gender diverse people have access to safe spaces for economic and political participation. This includes addressing issues of harassment and gender-based violence, including sexual violence. We need to advocate for leadership that is guided by ethical principles and a commitment to human rights and gender equality. And lastly, I'm not sure how much time I have, and sorry for the rant without kind of any visual aids to support. But I would like to give some high-level logistics related to the Commission on the Status of Women that might be of use, just to add to some of the points that were already laid out by my colleagues. As we know, the active participation of civil society is a critical element to the work of the Commission on the Status of Women, and UN Women facilitates the participation of ECOSOC accredited NGOs in each session of the CSW. CSW registration for NGOs in consultative status with ECOSOC is now open via the United Nations Indico registration system. We have already received about 2,000 registrations so far. But please be reminded that the conference focal point in your organization will need to approve the CSW registration of your representative prior to the registration deadline of January 26, 2024. And as I'm sure many of you know, online registration is mandatory for all participants who plan to engage in person. In terms of opportunities to engage directly in the formal processes of the Commission, one option is written statements. Unfortunately, this deadline is already passed, but just to give you some clarity for future sessions, if you haven't participated in this way, NGOs in consultative status with ECOSOC may submit written statements on the thematic issues concerned by CSW68. Submission of written statements was open from the end of September to mid-October. And this is usually a time frame that it's open every year. This year we have received more than 170 statements. It usually grows each year. And we thank those who have already submitted statements. They keep the Commission going. They keep the agreed conclusions strong and honest and relevant to feminist movements. And statements will be published on the CSW website via UN Women's site closer to the session, and are expected to be available starting in January 2024. Another opportunity to address the Commission directly in official convenings is through oral statements delivered in the general discussion. So subject to time availability, oral statements may be delivered during the CSW general discussion by a limited number of NGOs in consultative status with ECOSOC. We tend to give preference to those NGOs speaking about the priority theme or review theme directly, as well as to NGOs speaking on behalf of groups of organizations, caucuses, or coalitions, including coalitions such as Men Engage Alliance. Oral statements may not exceed 3 minutes, and sign up for NGOs in consultative status with ECOSOC wishing to express interest in delivering an oral statement during the general discussion usually opens in late January. And then there's another opportunity to deliver oral statements in the interactive dialogue. Similarly, a limited number of NGOs in consultative status with ECOSOC will be able to deliver interventions during interactive panels, subject to time availability. These are not in the form of pre-prepared statements. Therefore, NGOs are not required to submit copies of their interventions prior. They also do not exceed 3 minutes, and sign up for this for those wishing to express interest in intervening from the floor during an interactive dialogue usually opens as well in late January. And lastly, every year we at UN Women have worked with the Bureau of the Commission and the CSW chair to facilitate a set of NGO briefings by the chair of CSW. And right now, we're not sure exactly what the timeline of these briefings will look like, but there are usually about 4 to 5, if I'm not mistaken, NGO briefings that include the participation of the CSW chair each year in direct kind of dialogue with NGOs and their representatives. But we expect the program of work will be finalized in early December. And at that time, UN Women will begin convening our first informal briefing for civil society by the chair of CSW. As laid out by my Men Engage partners, I'd also like to add that there is an entire track that operates in parallel to the official sessions of the Commission on the Status of Women that is completely led by UN Women's very close civil society partner, the NGO Committee on the Status of Women. And these are opportunities because essentially many civil society organizations have the opportunity to, as I've just discussed, engage directly with the Commission, but this is limited to ECOSOC accreditation. And also many civil society organizations have the opportunity to host side events on the margins of the Commission on the Status of Women. But this is limited to those civil society organizations that partner directly with either a UN entity or a UN member state. So you can only access the official halls of the UN and book a side event that is considered official, as part of the official schedule of the Commission on the Status of Women. If you have, if you're working in partnership and co-leadership with a UN entity or a UN member state. So what the NGO Committee on the Status of Women does is they try to work around these kind of constricting frameworks, and they do a very good job of it through their NGO CSW forum. And there are thousands of parallel events, as we call them, that are led exclusively by, but not just exclusively, but can be led exclusively by civil society organizations and activists through that forum, and speak directly to those actors, governmental actors, civil society actors, philanthropies, UN entities who choose to engage as well in that space. So it's a great opportunity for those who either don't have official ECOSOC accreditation and or do not have a direct relationship with a UN entity or a UN member state to host a side event, to still have your voice heard in really powerful and movement building spaces on the margins of each session of the CSW. I'm going to leave it there for now, and I look forward to hearing any questions from the audience. And thank you so much again for my Men Engaged colleagues for facilitating this space, and thank you so much to all the incredible feminists who are on this call today. I appreciate your voice and your leadership in this space.
Sean, thank you so much to you for joining while under the weather. Much appreciated, and for your presentation as well as all the other speakers. Thank you very much. And maybe Rumbi, do you want to jump in? Because I know you just attended, and that's important to note, a civil society-led regional agenda setting process. So to be aware that there's the official process, and then oftentimes a dedicated space, led by feminist advocates to consolidate the advocacy agenda towards the official process. Maybe Rumbi, do you want to jump in and share with us about the one you just attended for the Africa region?
Thank you very much, Jenny. We just attended a hybrid consultation for the Africa CSW, and I think they formed a drafting group. I am part of that drafting group that is going to be drafting the position that we are going to submit to the Africa pre-CSW. So I'm going to share in my email, and if colleagues want to reach out with issues that they think need to be prioritized within that position statement, please do let me know. I've also shared in the chat section, I think the Africa ministerial meeting is going to be on the 14th of this month, but I don't think that will be open to many CSOs. It might be a closed, but we are going to try to send in our submission for that meeting. So yeah.
Thank you so much, and for raising too, that point specifically. These spaces are often restricted, so in some ways, through that coordinated solidarity alongside other movements, we can find various channels, to get our technical inputs in. And unfortunately, as we continue to witness more restricted space for civil society, I think the point is advocacy begins now, although the session will take place in March. And so it's important to begin to connect on what's happening both at national and regional level as we're leading into the collective session at international level in about 5 months. We're at time, over time. I was just going to share a few more resources in the chat, and there were so many resources shared today as others have commented. Maybe we can compile these, and then in a follow-up email to all registered participants, include that information as well as the PowerPoint. But one last set of resources we wanted to share, which of course will be connected to the language advocacy that we do on the agreed conclusions, which is such a key element of our advocacy, of our joint advocacy as an alliance at CSW, or just a few tools for how to, well, one is mapping of all of the various language that has been agreed upon on transforming patriarchal masculinities and engaging men and boys. If you're interested in taking a look at what we call the normative framework is at this time, and where we're trying to advance it towards, as well as a language advocacy tool where it's very easy to search any topic, any link of topics, and what has already been agreed by the international community in terms of that thematic. Which can just be helpful when we get into the process of providing technical inputs. Again, if you're interested in doing that, do mark that off in the survey so that we'll loop you into an advocacy group. Thank you for staying over. We're 4 minutes over. Appreciate your time. We're trying to stick to time. Thank you so much to all speakers today for being willing to join and share your expertise, because I think we all engaged in a lot of learning. Really appreciate your time and your enthusiasm to participate, as well as all participants. Thank you so much.